Welcome to Chapter 5. We start off with talking about groups, remember, so we've got social institutions that make up society, we've got statuses and roles, and we've got groups that you and I decide to join. So Cooley talks about primary and secondary groups. Sumner talks about in-groups and out-groups. And then something called reference group, which is a group that I may not be a member of, but I want to be a member of, and whose reference I follow. Group size, now this is one of those things that doesn't sound like rocket science, but again, George Simmel's one of the first people to actually study this, that behavior changes based on the number of people that are interacting. So you probably have a friend and you start talking with your friend. You don't share the talking time 50-50. Usually somebody talks more, somebody talks less. You add a third person. Again, they don't divide it 33, 33, 33. And again, so maybe you've got a friend that's good one-on-one, as an example of this. But you can't really take them around other people. They can't be around other people. They don't know how to act right. If you're like, oh, geez, I don't have a friend like that. Well, then that's probably you. Just saying that's probably how it works. The book talks about leadership and leadership functions. There's instrumental leadership, which is, the shift leader at work gets to tell me what to do. And then there's expressive leadership, that kind of leadership that we find people having in situations like within groups of friends, where there's somebody who always comes up with an idea and then everybody seems to want to follow that idea. Leadership styles. This is described in your book as authoritarian, democratic, and laissez-faire. Authoritarian, very straightforward, do it my way or you're in trouble. Democratic leaders, I guess, hey, let's all get together and vote on what do we do next. Actually never really seen that type of leadership. And then there's laissez-faire leadership, in which basically you don't have a lot of interaction, you just have, or oversight, you have, let's say, understood goals, and then you're allowed to reach those goals your own way. The book discusses conformity, which I think is, in our culture, that's a sort of a bad word, conformity. People don't like to be talked about as conformist or nonconformist. But we need to recognize that conformity is how we as a species have survived. Remember, from our earlier conversations about sociobiology, we as animals, we've got this oversized noggin thing, but we don't have fangs or fur or tails or claws, anything that would really help us. We really need a group to survive, and those that survived in the group probably conformed. Solomon Asch did an experiment with cards. I want you to look at that research. Make sure that you understand that about how somebody could change what they can clearly see, but they would change their opinion based on group input. Then there's Stanley Milgram's experiment about obedience and leadership. This is where perfect strangers would shock somebody. 65% of people would give what they thought was a severe or dangerous shock to a complete stranger if they were just told to. Groupthink. This is where members of a group privately think, hey, this is not a smart idea. I don't think we should be going down this path. But the desire to be a team player or be seen as a team player is, overriding, and they keep their opinions to themselves. The book, 11th edition, talks about the Deepwater Horizon explosion. Actually, I think one from an earlier edition of the book, which talked about NASA, is probably a better one. This is where groupthink, where they found out that the space shuttle explosions often had to do with the fact that they do a meeting called a go, no-go meeting, which they found was problematic because at that meeting, if I say, oh no, like rockets or computers or life support isn't ready to go, then I'm in trouble and I can lose my job, and it's not like I can go work for the other NASA. So they were willing to send people up because they were basically fearful of their jobs, so they embraced groupthink. When we talk about formal organizations, again, this is an institution like religion or family or economics has within it, in modern societies, formal organizations that our society says take care of that. The economic system, we've got the SEC, We've got government, all different kinds of government, city, state, county, federal government. Amate Etzioni came up with three kinds of organizations, formal organizations. Normative organizations, I just join because I want to, let's say like the PTA. Coercive organizations, where not so much I've joined, but society says you will join, like asylums and prisons. And then there's utilitarian organizations. I join because I think I'm going to get something out of it. Then there's a discussion of bureaucracy. Now, right away, I get it. A lot of people kind of zone out bureaucracy. Man, that's dull. But a couple of things. Thing one, Max Weber writes about it. And we love dead German guys in sociology, so definitely put a big check mark by this. Also, it's important for you to understand because almost all of us, 90% of us, will be working in some bureaucratic organization. So it's important for us to understand it. So he talks about rationality, process by which traditional methods of organization are replaced by formal rules and procedures. And also what he's saying there is that I rationalize that the rules are better for me. Even if I can see something that isn't good, I still rationalize that it's better for me. He also uses an interesting methodology trick called the ideal type. You find this in gymnastics, where somebody does a routine and they give them a score like 9.6, 9.75, 9.8. Those are supposed to be, the judges are using 10 being perfect. It's nobody's perfect. It's how close to perfect that you get. And that's what he was using as an ideal type to say, we don't have a perfect government model to go to, but we have this ideal type in our head about how it should work. How close are we to that? He also begins to talk to you about McDonaldization of society. This is George Ritzer's idea about how efficiency and quantity rather than quality and control of non-human technology is taken over our livelihoods, and that McDonaldization, the McDonald's hamburger, is an example of this, where it may not be great, but I can depend on its sort of sameness, mediocrity anywhere I go. Then we begin to talk about the informal side of bureaucracies. There's how bureaucracy should work, the rules, and then there's how things really work. And that's where we find out that, like, when you join a bureaucratic organization, you may think, let's say, oh, well, I outrank the admin assistants. I'm in charge of them. I'm more important. Careful down that trail. Often they'll know that you're cleaning out your desk weeks before you do. Always be nice. Be aware of the different levels of cooperative statuses in a bureaucracy. Problems of bureaucracy: inefficiency and rigidity. There's also something called goal displacement. This is where the actual goal of the organization is being displaced by all of the rules. I sometimes think of student loan offices where technically they're supposed to help students get money for school, but at least when I was at the University of Texas, they almost always treated us like we were in there to steal something. So the idea of getting us money seemed to be displaced by all of the rules that everyone had to follow. There's also something that Merton called the bureaucratic personality. This is that sort of dead inside, I'm following rules no matter what personality. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, visit any Department of Motor Vehicles and it'll probably leap out at you. Robert Michels came up with something called the iron law of oligarchy, tendency of a bureaucracy to be ruled by a few and for them not want to share power. And he's actually studied this. A bunch of leftist, socialist-leaning, social democrats came to power in Germany promising all of this fantastic change, and it didn't ever happen. And we find that once they were in power, they liked to stay in power, and they stayed in power, and they weren't wanting to share, and weren't trying to really complete all of their promises that they ran for offices as much as they wanted to stay in office. Bureaucratic structures in Japan. The book talks about that with this rather infamous picture here of the guys doing calisthenics, in case you don't know. So in Japanese corporations, you show up early you do jumping jacks and calisthenics, and then sing the company song before you clock in. And that just also shows the impact of culture. Remember that all the way back from chapter 2, that culture matters. In that culture, being part of the group and doing things the group way is the way to go about it. We're here in our culture, individuality is much more valued. So when they tried to bring that organizational structure to the United States, Japanese companies did, they got a lot of pushback from Americans who just didn't believe in showing up early and doing jumping jacks. That's it for chapter 5. So that's a short one. Okay?